cold wind crossed the plains as dusk fell over the empty land. The dirt road stretched for miles, painted red and gold by the fading sun. A rider appeared on the horizon, tall on a brown horse, his hat low and his coat flapping with the wind. His name was Cole Harper, a quiet cowboy who worked alone, living between the silence of open land and the whisper of his memories. He was heading home from the nearest town when he saw something that made him pull the reins hard. Down the hill near an old barn, a woman stumbled through the dust holding a small bundle close to her chest. Her dress was torn, her face pale, and her steps weak. When she looked up and saw Cole, her eyes widened with fear, not because of him, but because of the sound behind her. Horses, men shouting. The sound of whips. Cole didn't wait for words. He guided his horse down and stopped beside her. She looked up, her voice trembling. "Please, don't hand me over to them." She clutched the bundle tighter. "They'll take me back. I can't go back." Her words hit him like a blade. Cole didn't ask questions. He just said, "Get up, quick." She tried, but her legs failed. He reached down and pulled her onto the horse. Within seconds, the two rode off into the canyon's shadow, as the sounds of pursuit grew louder. By the time the night fell fully, they reached a small cabin hidden behind the rocks. Cole dismounted, helped her down, and opened the creaking wooden door. Inside, a small fire burned low. He handed her water, then looked at the bundle she held. It wasn't a bag, it was a child. A baby no more than a year old. The child whimpered softly before falling asleep again. Cole spoke quietly. "You're safe here. Nobody knows this place." She nodded weakly, tears falling on her dusty cheeks. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Her name was Sarah. Her husband had been a ranch hand who died last winter. After his death, the landowners she worked for sold her to traders passing through. They wanted the baby too to sell as a servant. She ran for days until she found herself lost in the desert, hunted like prey. Cole listened without interrupting. He knew the kind of men she spoke of. Ruthless, rich, and cruel. He had worked near them once long ago, and left when he couldn't stand the sight of chains and bruises anymore. That night, Sarah and the baby slept near the fire while Cole sat outside, his rifle across his knees, watching the stars. The prairie was silent except for the wind. He thought about the way she had looked at him, not with trust, but with the last bit of hope she had left. In the morning, he gave her his horse to fetch water from the stream while he checked the trails. But as she returned, a shadow appeared from the ridge. A group of riders moving slow, scanning the land. Slave traders. Cole saw them before they saw her. He waved for her to get down, but it was too late. One of the men shouted, pointing. Cole fired the first warning shot. The echo rolled across the valley. Sarah ducked behind a rock with her baby trembling. The traders fired back, bullets kicking up dust around them. Cole took careful aim, hitting a man's hat clean off his head. The group retreated behind a ridge, regrouping. He moved to Sarah quickly. "They found us," he said. "We can't stay here." She nodded, clutching the baby tight. "There's an old mining tunnel west of here. We can hide until dark." They moved fast, ducking between rocks and brush. The sun burned above and sweat mixed with dust on their faces. Behind them, the riders spread out, searching. At one point, a bullet whistled past Cole's ear. He turned and fired back just enough to slow them down. When they finally reached the tunnel, Sarah could hardly stand. Cole helped her inside, then blocked the entrance with dry brush and stones. Inside, it was cool and dark. The baby whimpered again, and she rocked him gently, whispering soft words. Cole crouched near the opening, rifle ready, listening to the footsteps outside fade slowly away. Hours passed. The heat gave way to cold. Sarah looked at him and whispered, "You could have left me." "Why didn't you?" He answered after a moment, voice low and calm. "Because I've seen what they do to folks who can't fight back." "Not again." Her eyes filled with tears. "My husband used to say there were still good men left in this world." I didn't believe him anymore. Maybe I was wrong. Cole didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to being called good. But as he watched her cradle her child, something old stirred inside him. Something he thought had died years ago with his brother during the war. A will to protect, a reason to stand. Outside, night fell again, and the stars returned over the canyon. The traders had not given up. They set small fires across the valley, waiting for any sign of movement. Cole saw them from the ridge through a crack in the rock. He turned back to Sarah. "We'll leave before sunrise. I know a man in the next town. Sheriff who hates slavers more than anyone alive. He'll help. Sarah looked scared but nodded. She trusted him now. The fear in her voice had softened into something steadier. When dawn came, Cole led the way out of the tunnel, guiding the horse quietly along the dry riverbed. The baby slept against her chest, wrapped in his old coat. The light grew golden again, painting the desert like fire. But just as they reached the open plain, one of the traders spotted them from a distance and shouted. The chase began again, dust rising behind them like a storm. Sarah held tight as Cole pushed the horse to its limit, his jaw set, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sound of hooves thundered behind them, closer every second. Ahead, the town's church steeple glinted faintly in the morning sun, still miles away but close enough to give hope. Cole turned and fired again, hitting the ground near the riders. They spread out, trying to cut him off. One of them fired, and the bullet grazed his arm, but he didn't slow. Sarah shouted his name, her voice shaking. "Cole, they're too many." He looked back once and said calmly, "Hold on. We're almost there." The horse ran harder, muscles straining, the sound of the wind swallowing the shouts behind them. Cole's vision blurred with pain, but he kept his aim steady. He fired one last time, and then the leader's horse stumbled, crashing into another. The line broke for just a moment, long enough for them to cross the ridge. As they descended toward the town's edge, Cole saw the sheriff's outpost and waved his hat. A bell rang. Men with rifles ran out, forming a line. The traders pulled back, realizing the chase was lost. Cole stopped the horse near the gate, his chest heaving, dust thick on his face. Sarah slid down, still clutching her baby. She looked at him, the man who had risked everything for someone he didn't even know. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You saved us." He shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to stand." And as the sun rose over the quiet town, Cole Harper turned his horse back toward the open land, the wind carrying away the last echoes of the chase. The widow watched him disappear into the horizon, her heart full of gratitude and peace, knowing she had met a man whose silence spoke louder than any promise ever could. Days passed since that morning when Cole Harper had vanished into the horizon, leaving Sarah and her baby safe in the small frontier town. The townsfolk took her in kindly, offering food and shelter. She stayed in a small room above the general store, helping the owner's wife with sewing and cleaning. Life began to feel calm again. Yet every night when the wind blew softly against the windows, Sarah thought of the man who had saved her. She wondered if he was still alive out there among the rocks and dust, still riding alone as he always did. The sheriff, a tall man named Grant Holloway, visited her often. He had been friends with Cole for years and spoke of him with respect. "Cole's a quiet one," he said one evening while cleaning his rifle near the porch. "Been through more than most men could bear. He lost his brother in the war. After that, he kept to himself, but when he helps someone, he means it." Sarah listened silently, her baby asleep in her arms. She whispered, "He risked his life for us. I never even thanked him properly." The sheriff smiled kindly. "He doesn't do it for thanks, ma'am, but if I know Cole, he'll come back to check you're safe. He always keeps his word, even if he never speaks it." Weeks turned into a month. The town grew busier as summer came, with traders, travelers, and ranchers passing through. Sarah had begun to rebuild her life. She helped cook for the local boarding house and spent evenings near the window, sewing tiny clothes for her growing child. But one morning, she noticed something strange. Outside the general store, a rider was asking questions. Not just any rider, but a man wearing a dark coat with a scar on his cheek. He carried himself like someone used to giving orders. When he saw Sarah, he tipped his hat slightly and smiled in a way that made her heart freeze. That night, she went to Sheriff Grant. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "One of the traders. I know his face." Grant stood from his desk, jaw tightening. "You're sure?" "Yes. He was there that night." Cole shot at them. "I'll never forget that face." The sheriff nodded. "Then we'll get word to Cole. If anyone can track them, it's him." He sent a rider out toward the open plains with a note the next morning. But days passed with no word. Meanwhile, the stranger kept watching, sometimes from across the street, sometimes near the livery stable. Sarah tried to stay calm, pretending not to notice, but the fear returned, sharp and cold like before. One evening, while closing the shutters, she saw smoke rising from the hills far beyond town. Not from a fire or camp, it was a signal. 3 thin columns of smoke. Her hands shook. It was a call the traders used when hunting runaways. They were close again. The sheriff gathered a few men and told her to stay inside. He promised she'd be safe. But deep down, Sarah knew the traders wouldn't give up until they took her back. She sat by the window all night, holding her baby, whispering prayers into the dark. At dawn, hooves thundered in the distance. The sheriff's men rushed out, guns ready, as a group of riders appeared on the ridge. But before they could reach the town, another horse came racing from the west, fast and hard. Sarah stepped outside and felt her heart jump. It was Cole. His hat was pulled low, dust on his coat, and a rifle slung across his back. He rode straight into town, stopping near the sheriff's office. "Grant," he called. "They're coming from both sides. I saw their camp. 15 men, maybe more." Grant cursed under his breath. "We'll never hold them off with 5 men. Cole turned to Sarah, his eyes steady. "You need to leave. Now." Sarah shook her head. "Not again. I can't keep running." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we make a stand." They moved quickly. Cole and the sheriff gathered the townsfolk who could shoot, ranchers, old miners, and a few brave farmers. They set up behind wagons and fences, ready to defend the small town. The church bell rang softly, a warning through the morning mist. Sarah helped carry water and bullets, her hands trembling but her face set with quiet courage. She refused to hide this time. She wanted to stand beside the man who had once saved her life. When the first shots came, the sound echoed through the valley. Dust rose, horses neighed, and men shouted. Cole stood in the street, calm as stone, firing with precision. Each shot found its mark. The sheriff shouted orders, keeping the line steady. Sarah watched from behind a wagon, holding her baby close. She could see the scarred man leading the traders, shouting angrily. "That woman's ours," he yelled. "She's worth more than all of you put together." Cole stepped forward, eyes hard. "Not anymore." He fired, and the leader fell from his horse. The rest of the traders hesitated, unsure. Cole shouted to them, "Ride away and live, or come closer and die here." Silence followed. The wind blew, and dust swirled between them. One by one, the men turned their horses around and rode off. Within minutes, the field grew quiet again. The townsfolk cheered softly, some crying, some just staring in disbelief. Cole stood there, his rifle still smoking, breathing heavily. Then he turned toward Sarah. She rushed forward, tears in her eyes. "You came back," she whispered. "I told the sheriff I'd make sure you were safe," he said simply. She smiled through her tears. "You always keep your word." Cole nodded, looking at the baby now awake in her arms. "He's growing fast." "Yes," she said softly. "He's all I have left." He looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You've got more than you think, ma'am. This town's full of good folks, and you're one of them now." Weeks passed again. The traders never returned. The sheriff sent word to nearby towns warning others of the attack. Life slowly returned to normal. Cole stayed on the edge of town for a while, helping rebuild fences and tending to horses. He never asked for payment. Every morning he'd ride out to the hills and return by dusk, always quiet, always watchful. Sarah often brought him food, bread, coffee, sometimes stew. They'd sit near the stable and talk, sometimes about nothing at all. She found peace in his silence, and he found comfort in her kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she asked softly, "Where will you go now?" He looked toward the horizon. "North, maybe. There's always work for a man with a steady hand." She hesitated before speaking again. "You could stay. The sheriff says he could use another deputy. The town could use someone like you." Cole smiled faintly. "I'm not much for staying, ma'am, but I'll keep riding through. Make sure things stay quiet." She nodded, though her eyes showed sadness. "Then promise you'll come back." He looked at her, the fading light reflecting in his eyes. "You have my word." The next morning, before sunrise, she heard the sound of a horse leaving town. She ran to the window and saw Cole riding away, the same way he came, silent, steady, and strong. She stood there for a long time, holding her baby and watching until he disappeared into the open land. Then she smiled, whispering softly, "Thank you, Cowboy." Years later, when her son was old enough to walk the same dusty roads, folks in town would tell him stories about a quiet man who once saved his mother, a man who never asked for reward, never stayed long, but always appeared when someone needed help. They said he was part of the wind that crossed the plains, part of the courage that built the West. And on calm evenings, when the sky turned red and the horizon shimmered, Sarah would sometimes think she saw him again, just a figure on horseback, riding toward the sunset, carrying with him the promise he had once made to a widow and her child.